Okay, welcome. So today is our Relax into Health, Wealth, and Happiness meeting. So what I'd like to invite you to notice is what the obstacle is presently. Now, I'm not asking you to think about it. I'm not asking you to understand it or figure it out or label it. You don't have to know what I'm talking about even. I'm just asking you to look, and I'm giving you a direction in which to look. So I'm not saying look in front of you, although you might look in front of you and discover the answer to what it is that I'm inviting you to see. I'm not asking you to look to your memories. I'm not asking you to look in any of the past. I'm not asking you to look at any of your concepts. I'm asking you to look just directly and simply, just right now, at the vulnerability, the sense that I don't know how, or I can't, or I'm not going to make it, or it's pointless, or however you understand it, whatever words point for you, so that you can discover what is that, that's been there. It's driving everything. It's the thing that makes, when you have a problem, it's the reason you have a problem. So you have you think so many different problems, right? You think you have maybe the financial problem, and you have the relationship problem or problems, probably problems, because we all have plenty of problems with all our relationships, all those people who we think if they would only do it differently, if only they would be different, then it would be better, then it would be easier. So we have relationship problems, and we've got health problems, and guilt problems, and shame problems, and all the different problems, on and on. And most of the time we're thinking about all those problems, thinking, how am I going to solve all these problems? How am I going to get away from all these problems? What's the answer to all these problems? Why do I have all these problems? We want to know, but we don't actually look to see what is the problem. And what I'm proposing is that you can look right now and see innocently the vulnerability that is here, that is the problem in all the problems. Without this, there couldn't be any problem. Without this, it would all be just stuff happening. Stuff happening doesn't matter. You can think about it this way, if you imagine for a moment that you are in some sort of space alien, and you're so completely alien that you exist in a different dimension and you don't have any of the same kinds of senses that humans have, and everything completely different. So I want you to observe for just a moment your experience through that lens. Can you imagine for a moment, just an instant, what that might be like? Now you can't, but you can start to open to that possibility to see that without that vulnerability, what I'm calling a vulnerability, the sense of mortality or failure or wrongness, without that, none of this is any of what you think it is. The sounds that are happening don't have the meaning that you think they have. The sensations don't have the meaning that you think they have. In fact, they aren't even what you think they are, sounds and sensations. If you really can open to that way of seeing, that way of perceiving, that kind of experiencing this, it was so subtle that it's also like being a newborn infant. Think about it's being a newborn infant is sort of like being an alien appearing here. Because all of a sudden, what is all this? You don't know. But most of us, we go about our days, day after day, we have all of these, we think problems. And maybe you think, oh, I don't have that many problems. Well, let me just make clear something. That what you call the problem is just one end of the stick. And you can't have that stick without the other end. And the other end is all the stuff that you think you need, all the wants and desires for what you think will give you fulfillment. Because what you think will give you fulfillment, what you think will satisfy you, what you think is good, what you think is desirable is in fact only known to be so because it is in contrast to what you don't want. Look at what, the masses they spend their time and energy and money on. And maybe you think it's all desirable, but I promise you, there's nothing in the human being that inherently, and certainly definitely not in the human being, and also not in the spiritual essence, that has any desire whatsoever or any need for any of those things. In fact, they're all just an unnecessary sort of burden. When, not that I'm proposing that you should take a vow of poverty and go begging for your food, but I am saying that the attachment that we have to all of these ideas is the bondage that we suffer from. So look and see, all of these things that you think you want, they only are known because of what you think you don't want. And what you think you don't want is all the stories that you give to cover up what's deeper. See, both of these, I think, two ends of this polarity are a cover. And what they're covered for is the deeper sense of whatever it is, vulnerability, incompleteness. So I'm just inviting you to notice that, because when you notice that, well, you have, this is what you really want. You just didn't know it. Now, how can you know that this is what you really want? Well, a couple of ways. One is that you could believe. Now, the belief only lasts for so long. You have to eventually have the direct experience, but you could believe, you could just hear and take it on good faith that there are those for thousands of years who've been recognized as sages who have delivered this message. saying, the kingdom of heaven is within, or Ramana saying, who am I? Find the self. So many who've delivered the same message, and we can take that on good faith, but then we have to look, because if we just take that as faith, it's dead. It's not a living reality that we can actually rely on. Here's another point, is that, and it's one that I really want to elaborate on more, because I haven't done very much elaboration on this point. But this, so everybody who has access to this has internet access, which means regardless of where you live and what your, all of your demographic details, you are heavily under the influence of what I would call Western consciousness. Okay, so Western consciousness is part of what I think Jung would call the collective unconscious. Okay, so Jung proposed that there is an unconscious. So it previously had been said there's an unconscious, and this was sort of revolutionary to have this discovery, but it was only private, it was only personal, it was only your unconscious. But Jung said there's an collective unconscious. So yes, there's a personal unconscious, but there's also something much deeper that all of that rests on, and he calls it the collective unconscious. And this Western consciousness is part of that. It's a part of this overlay that you inherited by being born here in this place and time, wherever you are. And it shapes everything that you do, but it's so close to you. It's like, it's like this very fine fabric, like a very thin, fine veil. And so you don't even know it. You don't know that it's here covering your face. But it is. And it contributes to the wrong understanding of this thing that I'm calling this vulnerability. So that we don't know that we automatically are perceiving through a particular lens, and we don't know how to stop, because it just happens like that, just so quickly. And it's happened so reliably that we haven't had enough contrast to be able to recognize that there's something that's not that, something that's prior to that, something that is independent of that. So this Western consciousness is a glorification of the individual. And this is simply what it is. We might have judgments about it, but it just is what it is. So we want to understand it. We want to have some knowledge about it so that we can start to recognize it in ourselves, and then see that we don't have to make those assumptions that there's something prior to that we have access to, that we are, that can have that discernment of what is true and false, which I've referred to before. It's called viveka. So this viveka, the ability to discern between true and false, is, we're told, and I can confirm, well, let me rephrase that. We're told it's essential, and I'm going to confirm that it certainly seems to be, from my experience. Question is, what does viveka mean? It means the ability to discern between what is true and false. Wouldn't that help you? Think about it. How much of your trouble is because you agonize over what's true and what's false, what's right and what's wrong, what should I do and what shouldn't I do, what's going to help me and what won't help me. like every day, agony over these things. So maybe then you can see why that's so helpful to have that viveka, that ability to discern. So I'm proposing that the most effective means that I'm aware of, at least, by which we can cultivate this viveka, this discernment, is by observing at the subtlest level that we possibly can. And that's why I'm saying, notice at the subtlest level this sense of something that seems to be the problem, the discomfort, whatever it is that you can't seem to get just right. Do you know what I'm talking about? You can't just seem to be right. You can't seem to be you can't really relax. You can't really feel that you're really truly yourself. Everything feels a little bit off, a little cramped, maybe a lot, but you can't your mind doesn't seem to cooperate, your body doesn't seem to cooperate, other people don't seem to cooperate, the environment doesn't seem to cooperate, the society doesn't seem to cooperate. Nothing seems to align and cooperate with whatever you perceive that you want. You're not really sure. It's just not this somehow. So we may invent so many stories about it. We invent, as I've listed off, we think it's about these people. We think it's about the politics. If only these other morons who are ruining everything would, have a come Jesus moment and realize what morons they've been, finally we could all be okay. How many people think like that? A lot of them, especially in America. I don't know about elsewhere, but holy cow. So we think it's about other people. We think it's about, our children or our spouses who are not doing things that we think are the right things to do. How many times have I had to tell you why you keep doing this thing? And you look and you see how so much energy goes into trying to manage it all at a relatively gross level, meaning it takes a lot of energy expenditure, because by the time the energy has gotten to that level, you're already very worked up. Have you noticed? That's why you can't sit still. It's why you can't relax. It's why I'm not going to say it's the only reason you have insomnia, but it's one of the reasons. Because it's this constant thing that's saying something's not right, and I got to fight and struggle against it. I got to protect myself. I've got to do all these things. So I'm saying, let's bring our attention to something that's subtler than that, because at that level, we lose almost every time. Haven't you noticed? It's like by the time it gets to that point, you wake up in the middle of the night, cold sweats, and some vision has come to you, and you're shaking inside, and maybe it's just me. But look, by the time it gets to that level, it takes an enormous amount of power, willpower. So if you feel exhausted, I'm suggesting to you, you're misusing your will. Because if you use your will and it's not being replenished, because it's a slow, maybe somewhat slowly replenished energy, and we deplete it so quickly because we're letting things get to this relatively gross level before we even become aware of them, and then we're resisting them because everything we think must be a problem. So, and just look and see. It's every sensation, not every sensation, but a lot of the sensations, don't they trouble you? Don't you say, oh, if only that sensation wasn't there? That sensation is the problem. That sensation is why I'm stuck like this. That sensation is why I can't do the things I want to do. So the sensations are problems, the people are problems, the government is a problem. It's all we think it's all these things. And I'm saying every time that you do that, just notice that well, maybe not every time, but increasingly, more and more you lose. For some of us, maybe when we were young, we were able to do that. We could just bulldoze our way. We had that level of will, that much energy that we could just bulldoze. I'm gonna just have my way. You're in my way. I'm just gonna go right through you. You're bigger than me. I'll manipulate you. I can't manipulate you, and you're more powerful than me. I'll avoid you. We got it all worked out until we realize one day, oh, it's not working out so well. Why can't I seem to succeed anymore? And then, that maybe goes on for a while, some of us years, decades. Start counting it more in like quarter centuries. Where you realize I can't succeed almost at all. Can't succeed even in getting out of bed. Can't succeed. I mean, have you been there where you want to get out of bed? You want to do things. Oh, that's a good one. You can't even want to do things. It was bad. You think it's bad enough when you can't will yourself out of bed and you want to do things. When you want to do things, but you can't even will yourself to want to do things, and you think that sounds crazy. It is. It's really miserable, but that happens. That's the total exhaustion of the will. So that's not the way. You got to stop. You absolutely must stop. Every time that you do that, you're only hurting yourself. You're only digging your own grave. So I'm saying, look at the subtler, look closer in and notice this discomfort, this primal discomfort, the primal fear of aversion, whatever you call it. And see how that runs your whole life. And really everything in your life. It's what you think you want and what you think you don't want. All based on that. And now especially those who have long-term insomnia issues, how much you really, really, really want deep rest. And those who haven't had that level of insomnia, at least reflect back on sometimes when you did have insomnia or where you stayed up too late and how you didn't feel so great the next day. It helps you to appreciate feeling good, feeling stable, having positive energy, being able to align your will and your actions and your thoughts and everything so that you can be coherent and coordinated and functional in a good way. So we must learn to better manage our energy. If we don't, we're killing ourselves and we've wasted our lives. Not that the purpose of life is to live as long as possible. Don't misunderstand me. And not that the purpose of life is to have as much hedonistic pleasure as possible, or to get as many things as possible, or to have as much power over others as possible. No. We could simply say that it is to know yourself. So if you're doing other stuff, you're wasting your life. Now, that would be maybe some very difficult news to receive if you believed that the only way to know yourself is to sequester yourself into some secluded place and do some sort of intensive, like starve yourself and sit in lotus posture and meditate endlessly from now to eternity, and that would be unpleasant and miserable. If you believe that, well, yeah, then this is all bad news. But what I'm proposing to you is that it's entirely possible to know yourself while while this life is happening and through this life. So this life is not in any way an impediment to knowing yourself. In fact, it's the vehicle by which you can know yourself. So we could say that this life is your choice, and you'd say, why on earth would I have chosen this? Come on. Am I like, what do you call that? Is that a masochist? That what am I a masochist? Because I don't want to be. Well, no. That all has to do with, at that gross level of thinking, you see, there's just an overlay that comes up like that. You don't know it, see, you don't see it. You don't know that you have another option. You don't know that there genuinely is a different way for you to see. So there are two things that I really want to emphasize. One is the importance of, well, let me say three things, okay? One is the importance of the subtle, which is what I have been by and large talking about up to this point. So it's very, very important that we allow ourselves to keep our attention on what is most subtle to the best of our ability, because that is about good energy management. And if we're not doing that, then it's bad energy management, simply because at the grosser level, it takes more energy to manage the energy. You see, because it's grosser level, so it takes a lot. Think about if you, like, think about, imagine the whatever they're called, the feathers from the breast of a bird, like a small songbird, and so they're little and fluffy. Okay. Imagine pushing that little feather with your finger, and then imagine trying to push with the same finger a 1 ton of steel. Which would you rather be doing all day long? If you're sane, you'll say the little feather. And so this is that little feather represents the subtle, and that 1 ton of steel represents the gross level. So by the time you're already thinking and believing that it's about this other thing and this other person and this situation and the whatever else, or even if you're thinking it's about this this disease that I have, or this problem with my body that I have, or this dysfunction that I have, or this whatever, you have a story about it. By that point, you're already pushing 1 ton of steel around. So you have to pull it back, because if you keep doing that, you just further exhaust yourself. And then your life is wasted. And when I say it's wasted, I mean, well, I guess you can understand that any way you want. But I don't intend it to sound like, in a sort of punishing way, like, and God will be upset with you. I just mean, you don't want to waste your life. That's all. It's not a judgment in that sense. It's just an observation. So I said there were 3 things, and we'll see if I can remember them. So that first thing is that we want to keep our attention with the subtle as best as we can. And depending on how much time we have, I may elaborate on that, because it's so important. Second thing is, it's, in my view, enormously valuable. And it's interesting. I've looked at, I've read some. I'm not particularly knowledgeable about most Buddhism. I have some knowledge, but not. It's not of all the things that I have some knowledge of. It's not one of them that I have the most knowledge of. But there's I read some things sometimes, and there's I have some interest, particularly in Tibetan Buddhism, and particularly, well, maybe all Tibetan Buddhism, particularly Mahayana. And I've read some instructions of different things at times, and they tend to emphasize that one of the early steps in the processes for their various practices often involves, they'll say, flashing on, and they have a word for it. It's like shunyata, I think, or something like that. But it means, it's translated as emptiness. Now, I don't know if that's the actual meaning. The Buddhist and Vedantic scholars like to argue these points with one another. I know that. But whatever it is, it's something transcendent of the normal sense of being a separate self. So I think it seems like they agree with me. There's some importance, there's some value in having that glimpse, of making that shift, of letting go for a moment at least. Because if we're so locked in, as we often are, to our stories, and then we've posed usually a false question to ourselves. We say, I want to solve this problem, and we say, and I can either do A or B. It's A or B. What am I going to do? And we say, I don't like either one of them. Got to do A or B, and it's usually a false position. So as long as we keep doing that, we keep ourselves stuck. But here's a simple and powerful way to help yourself get unstuck in any situation, is just like that, for an instant, let go of all of it. Just be willing to let go of all of it, just for an instant. I'm not saying push it away forever. I'm not saying make it all smiling faces. I'm not saying feel good. I'm not saying any of those things. I'm saying just for an instant, let it all go. That's it. Just let go. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to protect yourself. Don't try to get rid of it. None of those strategies, just let go, just for an instant. And in this instant of letting go, particularly, I would encourage you to notice notice whatever you can about this instant of letting go, because this gives you a kind of very big contrast, and that's one of its benefits. Remember, I said a lot of the time we're so influenced by this thin veil it's like nanotechnology. Just don't even hardly know it's there, but it's there, and it's filtering our perception. And so we don't know that, but if we can flash for an instant and on that which is transcendent of the veil, just let everything go for an instant. Don't grip anything, don't protect anything, don't strive for anything, just for an instant. Then observe in this one instant, in this one flash. You can see it in that way, like a flash. It's almost like there was this guy, can't remember his name now. I wish I can't think of his name, but I saw an exhibit once at a museum that had all these photographs taken by this guy. He was a photographer in New York City in I don't remember what years, earlier part of the 20th century. And there was a movie made inspired by him that had Joe can't think of that guy's name either. Anyway, but he would go around in the night. He likes to take pictures in the night, and he would take pictures. He would basically like sneak up on people, and then use flash photography, take a picture of them in the dark. So kind of bizarre, but very interesting. It's very candid. So think of it like that, like, you're just taking it's like a flash, and there's a photograph taken, and you can observe that photograph. You can observe that moment of stillness, that moment that's transcendent. You can notice and observe and see the contrast. That versus, see how candid that is, versus how the pretense of the veil, the pretense of what masquerades as you. See the difference. See how in this flash, that it's just pure, it's pristine. There's no burden, there's no problem, there's no separation, there's no duality. It's all perfect. Okay. And then you can see in contrast all the rest of it. Now here's the important point about it, is that notice that in this instant in which you let go, this one instant, again, you don't have to hold on to it. It's that flash makes it possible for you to observe it without worrying about time. It's timeless. So you can observe it really anytime without having to change anything. And notice that in this instant, this timeless instant, that you are here. Not the thought of yourself, not the thought isn't there in the instant. There's no thought there. So it's not even the thought of yourself, not even what Ramana calls the I thought. It's not there. But you are there. So it's a really important point, is we want to notice that in that instant, nothing else can be said to be there, but you are there. And so even though we're saying I am there, that I that's there is not a thing. It's not the body, it's not the mind, it's not the memory, it's not the thoughts, it's none of those things. Now, just look back and forth between these two for a moment. Just observe and contrast and see, so that you can see what I'm pointing out, because it's so important. That here in this one instant, there's clearly you are here. You can't deny it. There's no way you can deny it without going insane, because it's so plainly obvious. But then look to see, but who are you talking about? When you know you're here, but who is this you that you know is here? And as soon as you try to figure it out, you start comparing against all of these labels, all of these ideas. Well, is it my body? No. Is it my mind? No. Is it my feelings? No. The sensations? No. Is it my memory? No. You have to keep looking, contrasting in this way, and you'll see this kind of referencing goes on. And as you keep looking, you have to see, no, it's none of these things, none of them, none. But I'm here. So I am here, but the I who's here is not the I that's thought, not the I that's known in that way, not the I that I can tell a story about. So that's one of the important three things. So next, third important thing is that you'll likely notice, hopefully you're able to notice what I've pointed out just now, invited you to experience or perceive this flash of transcendence. I mean, I'm sorry to not have the right word, because any word that I use carries with it some baggage. So if I say transcendence, you think, oh, well, then I'm not there. It's transcendent. Or if I say God, you think it's some guy. And if I say it's self, you think it's the one you are, whatever spirit, you think it's some ghost. And they all have baggage. And there is no word that doesn't have baggage. So we just have to, please understand, it's none of those things. It's that which is beyond all those things, which you are. It's seen in the instant. So I hope that that's something that you're able to glimpse, have some recognition of. Now, so the third thing is that you'll probably notice that even though hopefully you can have that glimpse, and maybe you even notice that you can even have that glimpse kind of on demand anytime you want. There's this funny thing, which is that you don't seem to be able to have that continuously. And in fact, you seem to get re-identified with that which you've seen that you're not. So when that happens, of course, go back to the first important thing, which is try to keep your attention on what is subtle. I do want to elaborate on that, but if I do that right now, we'll never get to the third point. So I'll go to the third point, and then we'll see if there's time to elaborate on that second one. So the third thing is then that sometimes you can recognize this timeless nature, formless nature problemless nature. Sometimes you don't seem to be able to. And sometimes when you don't seem to be able to, you do seem to be able to keep your attention with what is subtle. And when you do that, what it allows you to do probably is be able to eventually, sooner or later, whether that's in a second or a minute or an hour, to again have this recognition of the formless self, the problemless self. However, if that was all there was to say about it, which in some ways is true, but in other ways isn't adequate. Because if that was all that there was to say about it, then you just left probably feeling hopeless and frustrated, because what about the rest of the time when you don't seem to be able to do either of those? You can't even remember. So this third important thing, I am like, you must be on the edge of your seat by now. I've been promising this for 40 minutes. Third important thing. Now let's hope I can remember. I have to walk myself through it again. Okay, so if I find that I'm in this situation and I've been despairing and struggling and all of that and whatever, and then I come to myself somewhat enough, kind of come out of my bad dream enough that I'm able to remember, what am I doing wrong? How have I gotten myself in the situation? And then I can remember, oh yeah, I need to keep my attention with what's subtler. Oh, I really want to elaborate on that one because it's so important, but I can't do it. Then but in that moment, also what I want to realize is I want to take responsibility for my life so that I don't end up in that situation again. Now, it's like the most obvious thing, except that nobody ever pointed it out, and so we don't know. So I'll repeat it because it's to me, such a powerfully important thing that we otherwise we will not benefit from because we don't fully understand it. So we really need to take a moment to try and understand it, which is when I wake up enough that I realize that I've been asleep and I was experiencing a nightmare, and then I was hurting, and in fact I was really actually hurting myself, but I didn't realize it. At that time, there are two things that I need to do. One of them is that I need to remember to put my attention on what is subtler. And the second thing that I need to know is that I also need to recognize how I got myself into that situation of a nightmare, how I fell asleep in that way, so that I don't do that again. It's like if in the United States, I don't know about elsewhere, in many places in the United States, on busy roads, they will put down what they call rumble strips, either on the shoulder or sometimes in the median between the oncoming lanes, and they're just I don't know what to call them. They're indentations in the road, in the pavement, that make the car shake if the driver veers off and is otherwise probably going to go off the road or into oncoming traffic. So it's like they were falling asleep, it wakes them up. Now, if you go into the rumble strip and it wakes you up, what should you do? Obvious answer is you need to figure out why you just went into the rumble strip and make sure that doesn't happen again. So if you were falling asleep because you're tired, You need to get off that road to a safe place as quickly as possible so that you can take a nap or do whatever you need to do in order to not have that problem. But most of us go through our lives and we're hitting rumble strips all the time in our lives. I mean, not metaphorically, not literally necessarily, but you're going through your life and all of a sudden it's like, oh, feel so bad. And life's like, hey, I'm trying to help you out. You're getting off the path. You want this way, you want this because this is true. This is you. This is the fulfillment of your purpose, because your purpose is to know yourself. If you're doing something else, you're gonna crash. You stay here. This is what this is your choice. This is good for you. This is what you want. This is the best. But what do? We don't heed the warning. We go back to sleep. So we need to, when we are come back awake, we need to notice what just happened. How did this happen? How did I fall asleep in this way? Because this is no good. If I just was in an argument with somebody, if I was just shouting, if I'm burning up with rage, if I'm shaken with anxiety, if I'm experiencing intense worry, whatever, how did this happen? Now, all of what I've said, I hope, sounds just absolutely brilliant to you, because it certainly should. I mean, I don't know about everything, but the 3 points, if you understand them, should sound brilliant and true and good and helpful and hopefully even encouraging. But you might say, and I hope that to some extent it seems also doable. Although I know I haven't really elaborated as I want to on the second point. But before I do that, I have some concern that on this third point, you perhaps may still have some questions or concerns about how can I actually succeed in that? How can I actually determine what just happened? Because I don't know what that means. So I want to take a few minutes to walk you through what I mean by that so that it's clearer, because I want it to be something that is actionable for you. Because my intention here is that this is something that you can actually put into practice in your life starting immediately and benefit from. That starting immediately, your life can be better. But now that I said that, I feel that I need to explain that too, or qualify that so it's clear. So maybe I will do that, qualify what I mean by better. But of the two, I think the more important is that I first make it clear what I'm suggesting when I say that you can become aware of what it is that you were doing. So, or how you got into that situation. So how you got into that situation, let's just break it down. And for, especially for those who attended Tuesday's Moving to Stillness meeting, this should be fairly clear to you once I point it out. But it also may be clear to many others because I've pointed this out over time, many times in various ways, is that so the problems occur when you go unconscious. And so we want to see how do you go unconscious? That's really the question that we're asking when we say, how do you get into this problem? Is how do you go unconscious? And what I want you to see, inviting you to look and see, is that when you go unconscious, it's because there's a a particular what we would call latent tendency, or some conditioning in the system that has been triggered or provoked, and so it's like it's latent, but now it's activated. It was there in seed form, and now it's sprouted. And what appears is there's a thought, and the thought could consist of, it could have words associated with it. I'm starting to think, when I observe this, it seems to me that actually maybe we could say that the thought always is an image, meaning it appears as a gestalt. It's its own thing, and then we translate it through the various senses. But we'll just say, we'll call it an image / thought. Okay, and so there's that, and then there's a sensation or a feeling. And you'll notice that the image thought by itself, remember, like, you're a space alien and you function completely differently, and you're here and you're perceiving all of this, but it doesn't mean anything to you. So it's appearing, but the meaning isn't there. The meaning is provided by the feeling. So there's the image thought, or let's also, let's use some language there to also make the point, which is, let's imagine that you just have the thought, I'm being attacked violently and I'm dying. But if there's no feeling attached to it, there's no problem. It's just a thought. As a brief aside, there's a very simple NLP technique that I learned years ago from I can't remember his name at the moment, but very, very effective technique, which is all you have to do is, if you have a thought that seems to be triggering some disturbance for you, just think the thought, slow it down. Slow it down enough that it doesn't have the same charge to it, that, in other words, the feeling. So they become dissociated, and then it helps you in this regard. So there's a simple technique that you could try out. But you have the thought, and then, but by itself, it doesn't mean anything. It's just sounds, it's just image, just energy. And then you've got the sensation. So we might say, well, the sensation then must be the problem. Well, hold on a second. Because if you have the sensation and you don't have any thought that tells you anything about it. So if if you have the sensation coupled with a thought and the thought says it's bad sensation, problematic sensation, scary sensation. There you go. Strong sensation with a thought associated with it that says that it's bad. You say, it's bad. But what if you have strong sensation with a thought that says it's good? I'm making love with the person I love, having an orgasm. You have that thought and you say, oh, it's good. So maybe the sensation is not the problem. So the sensation by itself, purely sensation, also not a problem. Now that one's often a little bit more challenging to actually demonstrate to yourself, but it is possible. It requires some willingness on your part just to be with the pure sensation. So that's also a very effective technique, is just be with the pure sensation and not attaching to any thought. Or you can go the other way and allow the pure thought or image without the sensation. And Tuesday's meeting provided more elaboration on how to, on another way to achieve that. Okay, so these two things co-arise because they've been, out of habit, they've been bundled up together, but they don't go together. It's like, you went, did some errands and you put everything in one bag. You've got an apple in the bag and you've got a can of paint in the bag. The apple and the can of paint don't go together. They just happen to be in the same bag together. So out of habit, this sensation and this thought / image, they're in the same bundle together, just stored there in seed form together. But that's it. They don't go together otherwise. But they co-arise because just so happens they're bundled together. And so when one is triggered, the other one is triggered, and they co-arise and say, oh, they go together. Bad feeling. So we want to see this. And now, how does this tie back together? I want to kind of bring it back together with this point that I briefly touched on about this veil of the unconscious. So you have, we can say, personal unconscious. You have a collective unconscious, and within the collective unconscious is the Western consciousness. So just one component, but it's very influential. And so we want to just see some of the things about it. So because, and this is a topic we could go into an enormous amount of detail on, and I think it would be worthwhile. It is so worthwhile, in fact, that I'm intending to offer a new program in which we'll be doing exactly that. So I can't cover all of it, obviously, in detail here in the couple of minutes that we have remaining. But I want to just point out some things. Okay, so the way in which you perceive, the way that you conceive of yourself and of life and your relationship, can you see that is very different from the way that the way that somebody who, whatever time it may be, whether it's present day or in the past or in the future, somebody who is living in a hunter-gatherer community without having never had any contact with Western civilization. Can you imagine perhaps that their way of understanding themselves and their world is radically different than yours? Because I promise you it is. So much so that the ideas that you would talk to them about would make no sense, and the ideas that they would talk to you about would make no sense to you. You wouldn't really understand one another, even if by some miracle you actually spoke the same language, which couldn't happen because the language gives shape to our perception. So that couldn't even happen. But even if somehow you could, communicate in some other fashion, the perceptions don't match up. They're completely different. For example, so there's this it's traceable in what's called Western thought, that there was a rise in the in this and a development of the sense of being an individual. that there's what we call lunar consciousness. So the many traditional people have, for as long as is known, have um, understood time not as a linear thing, but as a cyclical thing. So understand what a difference that is. And cycles, cyclical time tends to correspond more with the moon, because the cycles of the moon are observable. Anybody who lives for, a couple of moon cycles can see the cycles of the moon, can understand that, can have a relationship with it, can measure their experience against or in relation to the movement of the moon. Everything is understood in terms of the moon. And so this idea of, in fact, my understanding is, and this may not be universally true, but my understanding is, at least by and large, North American traditional people did not observe birthdays because it didn't make any sense. They didn't have that concept because they're lunar people, and so all of their thinking is lunar. All of their relationships are lunar. It's all cyclical, nothing linear, nothing about progress, nothing about the advancement of the individual, nothing about the advancement of the civilization, nothing about any of that, because it doesn't enter into their thinking, because it's not part of their inheritance. So we're all of us are walking around. You see, like this meeting starts when? Starts at a certain time, clock time. So we're using clocks. We're using the 12-month calendar system. We have birthdays. And we're influenced heavily by that way of perceiving, so that it colors everything. So we can't but help fall back on very quickly these notions of, but I have to continue through this linear time. I have to make it to my 88th birthday. I have to, whatever. And, where civilization is going is this big thing, we're concerned about it. But if you start to understand that that's not the only way to perceive, and that you've just been blinded to the veil that was coloring your entire perception, it helps you in this process so that you don't fall into those traps again, so that you can remain awake. Because what happens is, and I'll try to wrap it up quickly here, try to tie it all together, is that if you can notice where we started, the entry point to this inquiry was, I invited you to notice that subtlest sense of some kind of disturbance or protection or vulnerability, or whatever you understand it as. And just notice it as the subtlest way that you can, and then see if you can observe it even subtler still. So that's our starting point. And then from there, just observe and see, because you'll start to see that things come up. It's like things are bubbling up. There's so much stuff happening all the time. Even if you're sitting in a cave and you say, well, it's all kind of the same forever and ever. The light doesn't change, the temperature doesn't change. There's still a lot of change, just in subtle ways you don't perceive with your grosser senses. But definitely, we know that the human body is definitely sensitive to, for example, the changes in the magnetic field of the earth, the changes of the gravitational pull of the moon. We know that the human body is sensitive to sun flares. So you don't know it consciously, but these things are happening all the time. So you're being these things are being triggered all the time, all the time. This is why you can never get things perfect enough. You can never ever get safe enough, because you can only conceive of that safety or that perfection at a gross level. And you can't even achieve that. But even if you could achieve it, even if you could have that perfectly safe environment with only the right people who never misbehave, and everything is always exactly right, temperature is just right, and the humidity is just right, and your body is taken care of in exactly the right way so that it never hasn't, everything's exactly right. Sun flare, and you're triggered. Moon phase, you're triggered. So these things are happening and you're being triggered. So rather than the way that we go about it, which is at a gross level, trying to organize everything so that I can think, okay, the circumstances are all right, that I should be able to feel all right. Instead of doing that, let's start to look at a subtle level and then see at the subtlest level possible for us as these things bubble up, because they're being triggered all the time, every single second. Because this is what we actually want. And I know that doesn't make any sense, because you think that you want all those things out there. You think you want the safe space with the right people and all the things and yada, 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 and the right stimulation of the right kind. But I want you to see none of that will ever work. And what you actually want is you want to have the true confidence of knowing yourself. And that means knowing okayness. Not dependent okayness, but independent okayness, meaning whatever the circumstances are, what sun flares, full moon, gravitational field, magnetic field, the people shouting at you, the whatever, nasty sewer smells, and all of it, that all of that is actually only to help you to know yourself even more clearly, to know the truth of yourself, the bliss of yourself. So if we keep looking in the wrong way out there, we're going to be continuing to waste our energy at a gross level. When we start to look at a subtle level, then we want to start to observe all of the things that bubble up so that we can see them before they get so big, and we can observe, oh, there's that subtle sensation, there's that subtle thought. And just to be with it, just to be still, just to know yourself, to know who are you really. It's not about solving some mystery so you can, on the final page you can write, and the mystery is solved and the answer is. It's so that you can know this lived reality, which is not a thing that's going to be had, but it is a happening. And it is in fact this happening. It is the sun flares, and it is the full moon, and it is the argumentative people, and it is the bankruptcy, and it is the sickness, and it is all of those things. Not that I'm saying you should wish for those things. Please don't misunderstand. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that you have to now say, oh, but any kind of comfort or luxury is bad. No. So all the same, it's all welcome. But see that when your attention is on that gross level, you're exhausted, anxious, angry, and when you keep your attention here and you start to really watch with the intention that I don't want to fall asleep again. I don't want to crash. I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to hurt others. I don't want to waste my life. I want to fulfill the purpose of my life. I want to know myself. I want to be that fully. I want to be willing to remain in the current of truth. And it doesn't even have to, it is truth with a capital T, but it doesn't even have to be considered truth with a capital T, because maybe that's too big or too something. Let's just say the truth of who you are, and which you cannot arrive at by thinking about it. You can know it directly by observing, and see that when you observe in this way that I'm describing, you are in the flow of the stream of your life, of the truth of yourself, and that it is bliss. If only when you go unconscious, trying to ride that thought or that sensation, and then you start wrestling with it, battling with it, then you get knocked unconscious even more, and you're beaten up, and when you come to, you say, oh, it hurts so much. Okay, so you got to remember two things. One is you got to stay subtle. Two is you got to remember to see how you go to sleep so that you don't go to sleep. And so you just watch as it's bubbling up, and you'll see there it is, subtle sense of just that, oh, but something that I don't like it. And just don't let it go further. Don't suppress it. Just actually welcome it. Instead of believing the story about it. So here's the final thing I'll say about it, because I just want to tie the thing in, make it more clear how it's helpful, is when you start to notice the thought or the image that's pulling you, where you start to think that's true. They really are going to harm me. I really am going to be destitute. I really am going to be in pain forever. It really is unbearable. It really is their fault. All these things. When you notice, as soon as you can notice that you're starting to believe that, or that thought has been triggered, as soon as you can notice that, I want you to start to just question, is it really true? It's like Byron Katie's questions. It can be really useful here. Is it true? It's all their fault. Is it true? I mean, come on. It's obviously not. Or, like, I want to make it clear, like, this applies to everything. And I'm not saying that you can't take some what might be in self-preservation actions, like step out of the way of the bus. It's okay. You don't have to stand there inquiring, is it true that if the bus hits me that it will be a bad thing? No, you don't have to do that. It's okay. You can get out of the way, please do. But in the situations where you feel stuck, where you feel like, I don't know what to do, what's the right thing, and you feel like bound, where there's not clarity about what the right thing is or what the good thing is, and you're feeling all that anxiety and all that frustration and all that anger and all that, and you're looking for something to blame and for the story that will help you to figure out what you're going to do about it, and you're not finding it because it's all wrong, then in those moments, ask, is it really true? And uh, invite yourself to open up to the possibility that it might not be true, which is to say, be willing to see what you're blind to, see the veil, step back and realize, what if I didn't assume all of these things that I assume? What if I didn't assume that I had to have these things all the time? What if I didn't assume that my experience had to be this way? What if I didn't assume that I had to always have only these feelings and never these feelings? What if I didn't assume that this experience was bad? What if I didn't assume that I knew what it meant? Like, if I was that space alien, can I see it in that way? So that, like, imagine the space aliens there, and these two parties come and they say, we need somebody to judge for us. The one's telling his side and the other one's telling his side. How's space alien doesn't even know what they're saying, doesn't even know that there's people there. You want to start to see it like that. So is it true? No, you don't know that it's true. And how do you feel when you believe it's true? You obviously feel bad. So right away, you've got some clarity. Well, I don't know it's true. When I'm believing that it's true, I feel bad. So this seems pretty suspect. Let's take it a little further. So now, if I didn't believe that was true, then what might happen? So, like, if I'm there, I'm in the middle of the road and bus is coming, and if I didn't, so do I know it's true that if the bus hits me, it's going to hurt? No, I don't actually know that's true. But if I didn't believe that was true, and I keep standing here, what might happen? Well, I might get hurt, because it seems pretty likely. So, but on the other hand, so then you get out of the way. But on the other hand, most of the time, what you'll see is, you know what? Actually, maybe something good could happen. If I didn't believe that I had to defend my position in this argument about, some whatever, how to raise our children, what the right political view is, how to, what my neighbors should be allowed to do or not do, or any of these things. If I didn't believe those things, what might happen? Well, holy cow, maybe I would feel better. My relationships would be clearer and easier. I'd have an easier time genuinely wishing these people well. I'd have more energy and more positivity for the things that are important to me. So then from there you could use the Sedona method. You ask yourself, well, could I let it go? Would I let it go? And when? Because you could let it go, and you certainly would let it go. So how about now? And then you just be willing to let it go. Not get rid of it, not fight with it, not condemn it. Just let it go. And if letting it go means that it hangs out here for a while, okay. And if letting it go means that it goes away, okay. And if letting go means that there are other layers, deeper layers of stuff that I hadn't been aware of that all of a sudden I'm noticing, okay. Then repeat the same process. And I say it all like it's the easiest thing in the world. It's the hardest thing in the world. But as far as I've been able to determine, it's the most important thing in the world. That's why I share it with you. So I sincerely believe, and my experience is that it is worth it, and that it can begin to bless your life starting today. And I encourage you to put it into practice. If you have any questions, concerns, or doubts, you can let me know. And I appreciate your time. I know that I went quite over. And so thank you. Thank you for your willingness, and I appreciate you. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Blessings to you all, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.